Good morning, Unity of Springfield. This is James, and today I am going to be talking about the Kybalion, the Hermetic philosophy of ancient Egypt and Greece. And this is a really small book that I read several years ago, and it just recently came back into my awareness as I have been studying Unity history. And this book is actually tied to Unity history, and I'll get to that in a minute. But let's talk about what Hermetic principle is, because this book is about Hermetic principles. So Hermeticism is known as a school of thought related to ancient Greek philosophy and ancient Egyptian philosophy based off of the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus. And Hermes Trismegistus, by the time his teachings reached Greece, had gained godlike stature. In fact, the name Trismegistus means godlike. And this was a man who lived in ancient Egypt and studied and taught alchemy. Not the kind of alchemy that we think of today, turning like metal into gold, but the type of alchemy of the mind, which is what the Hermetic principles within the Kybalion are all about. Hermes Trismegistus was known as the master of all masters, people who follow his teachings. The teachings of Hermes Trismegistus were passed down from master to student throughout the years in these Hermetic teachings, sometimes called mystery schools, the mystery schools of Egypt and the mystery schools of Greece. And he is also known as the father of occultic wisdom and the father of the mystery schools. Now, not every mystery school teaches the Hermetic teachings, but there's good evidence to see that these teachings were passed down. We have historical evidence that there were these mystery schools, and we're not exactly sure if all of the 7 Hermetic principles found in the Kybalion were actually from these schools or not, but that's the basic history. And if you've ever heard of the Philosopher's Stone, which is said to bring a person the elixir of life, eternal life, and also can turn base metals into gold, pure gold, this is actually believed to be an allegory of this man, Hermes Trismegistus, that this was just an allegory about his teachings. The main teaching of Hermeticism is mastery of mental focus, the ability to master mental focus to be able to manifest circumstances that are uplifting or that fulfill our desires. And there are several Hermetic books. The biggest issue with Hermetic teaching is that it was an oral tradition for a long time. So a lot of the books are fairly new, such as the Kybalion, which was written in 1908 or 1909. I apologize, I didn't write that part down. But I have a list of some of the books. The Hermetica, most Western writings about Kabbalah, Kabbalah, Corpus Hermeticum, the Emerald Tablets, and the Way of Hermes. All of those books are actually fairly new when we're thinking about ancient Egyptian and Greek history, but they're all based on these teachings that were orally passed down by Hermes Trismegistus within the Hermetic orders. And so what does that have to do with Unity? Well, the author of the Kybalion states that it is the 3 initiates of one of these mystery schools. Well, throughout history, people have believed that this book was actually written by a man named William Walker Atkinson. And William Walker Atkinson was first published by a man named Charles Fillmore. In 1889, he published an article called A Mental Science Catechism in Fillmore's publication named Modern Thought. And Atkinson's a really interesting character. He published a lot of works under many pseudonyms, which is one of the reasons why people believe that this book was actually his, because the writing style, the content is very similar. Atkinson studied with and actually moved to be close to Emma Curtis Hopkins, which is a prominent New Thought figure. He studied things like mental science, New Thought, yogic teachings. He did psychic research, arcane studies, personal magnetism research. There's a whole bunch of information, and he wrote a lot of different things, and the Kybalion just happens to be one of them. And I just found it interesting that as I was doing some of my reading about Unity, I saw his name come up and realized, it's interesting that the first publication was a Unity publication, or was within the Unity movement. And it may be that the Kybalion wouldn't even be around without the Unity movement. And so let's get into the content of the Kybalion. I'll give you just the basics of the 7 principles. The first principle is the principle of mentalism. The second principle is the principle of correspondence. The third one, principle of vibration. Fourth one, principle of polarity. Fifth one is the principle of rhythm. The sixth one is the principle of cause and effect. And the seventh one is the principle of gender. And we'll take some time going into each one of those individually. So the first principle of the Kybalion that I want to talk about, the first Hermetic principle, is the principle of mentalism. And this principle is pretty basic. It just says that the mind and the universe are both mental. And what does that mean? Well, I know when I was growing up, if somebody used the word mental, they meant it was crazy. And it is true that sometimes this universe does seem crazy, but that's not what they're talking about in the Kybalion or in Hermeticism. What they're talking about is that we are an expression of the mind of God, that the universe itself dwells within the mind of God and is a thought in the mind of God. That is one thing that shows up multiple times within the Kybalion, is that we are a thought in the mind of God. And that through our own thoughts, our own thinking patterns, we can shape reality. Now, the one distinction that is made at the very beginning of the Kybalion is that the mind itself, the divine mind, or the universal mind, which in the Kybalion is called the All, is unchangeable. And that all of the changes that we experience in terms of evolution or, birth and death and all of those changes, those exist within the mind, but the mind itself is unchangeable, and we are a thought in the mind of God, and that we're a perfect thought in the mind of God, and that we only have this evolution that we're experiencing. We only continually evolve. We are continually elevating our consciousness. So this is what the Kybalion says. Mind may be transmuted from state to state, degree to degree, condition to condition, pole to pole, vibration to vibration. True Hermetic transmutation is a mental art. And that's, first of all, I want to talk about transmutation, because the word transmutation simply means to change form. And it can actually be changing physical form as well. This is why Hermetic teaching is so, most alchemy is within the Hermetic umbrella. And it is also the practice of attempts to change base metal into gold. It's a physical transmutation through the mind, is what Hermetic teaching represents, that there's a process that could be undergone that could transmute a physical substance like that. Now, the Kybalion is not an alchemical book like that. Kybalion is a mental transmutation book, so it's a mental alchemical book. And so what does that mean? That simply means that this particular Hermetic teaching is associated with the shift of a mental state. And with that shift of a mental state, our experience of life also shifts with it. Like I was saying, the All is that's the main term that is used in the Kybalion, but the All is unchangeable, and we all exist as a thought. The universe exists as a thought within the All, and that we're forever protected sort of by this immutable principle of the All. And this is another quote from the Kybalion. Under and back of the universe of time, space, and change is ever to be found the substantial reality, the fundamental truth. And that's what we in Unity would call God. You know, we say that there's only one presence and one power in the universe and in our lives, God, the good, omnipotent. The Kybalion would just refer to that as the All. and would be good. I mean, the Kybalion certainly represents the all as love. I mean, that's the evolution of consciousness described in the Kybalion is toward greater experiences of things like love and joy and peace. So, that would be a reflection of the all, since mental alchemical transmutation is about our own human evolutionary journey and our evolutionary consciousness journey. Okay, so now the one thing that the Kybalion does go into a little bit is that there are some people that take this principle and they declare that, oh, I am God, or I am the all. And the Kybalion actually describes this as an error form of thinking. And I like the descriptions. Well, there's a few different ways that the Kybalion sort of explains this. One of the ways is that, the cell of a body is not the body. But the cell of the body, and actually the Kybalion I don't think says this, but this is sort of where I had taken it. The cell of the body has the entire blueprint of the body, because the cell has the genetic code, which is the blueprint of the body. But the cell isn't the whole body. The cell is a part of the body. We are a thought in the mind of God, and our mind is within the mind of God. Another example that I really liked when I first read it was about Shakespeare and Hamlet. And it says that Hamlet is in Shakespeare, but Hamlet is not Shakespeare. And I really like that that idea as well, that we're a thought in the mind of God, and that because, we are in the mind of God, and within the mind of God, we can experience change and transition, that our consciousness can evolve and we can make choices toward these things. In fact, the Kybalion is very specific about how we're holding thoughts within our mind, and that when we hold mental images within our mind, we do shape our experience. It goes so far as to say the universe is mental, held within the mind of the all, but then we are the reflection of that mind, which means that the images that we hold in mind they shape our universe, and the experience of our universe is based off of the thoughts that we are holding in our mind, because we are a reflection of that divine mind. Whew! That's a lot, but I hope that makes sense to some degree. And basically, the main takeaway from the first principle is that the universe is held within God. It doesn't exist outside of God. And the universe, or my apologies, the God permeates all that is within, which is a very basic unity principle in how we teach, the principles as well. And that, our mind shapes our reality. Our mind shapes the world that we are experiencing. So that's the first principle, and then we'll move on to the second one. Principle of correspondence, and you've probably heard of it before, maybe without even knowing that it is a Hermetic principle. Now, this principle is actually found in other places. In fact, even the Bible specifically talks about it in one way or another. But this principle is, simply put, it is as above, so below, as within, so without. And what it means is that we exist in different First of all, we exist in different planes of existence, and these planes of existence are equivalent to each other. So in this particular principle does get a little complex. I'm not going to go into every single plane of existence that the Kybalion and the Hermetic teaching talks about, because this would be a multi-week class. But there are essentially three planes of existence: the physical plane, the mental plane, and the spiritual plane. And each one of those has 7 planes of existence. Now, from a Hermetic type understanding, this does not necessarily mean physical planes of existence. They're not like different dimensions or anything like that. In fact, I have a quote here, and it says, "The planes are neither places nor dimensions of space, yet they are more than states or conditions. The planes don't have ordinary dimension of length, depth, and breadth." And so the way that it's described in the Kybalion is that these are vibrational states they're vibrational states of consciousness within the mind. So, you have to remember all of these principles are tied together. So the principle of mentalism ties together with the principle of correspondence. So what does this mean practically? This means that if we make internal changes, the external, the physical plane changes. As we elevate our consciousness, the experience of the physical plane shifts. And I actually really like the work of Dr. David Hawkins. He developed a scale, a vibrational scale related to consciousness. And if you were to put that vibrational scale into the understanding of the Kybalion, it actually makes a lot of sense. So let's say someone wants to experience more abundance in their life. So the law of as above, so below, as within, so without, means that if they have a poverty mindset, if they have a mindset that keeps them stuck, that it wouldn't even matter if their financial situation changed, they would eventually revert back to that state of mind. For example, there's a lot of people that believe that if they just win the lottery, their whole life would change and everything would be okay. Yet, if we look at the statistics of people who win the lottery, they'll win the lottery and they'll go through that money very quickly. And a lot of them will even end up worse off than they were prior to winning the lottery. And it's because abundance is a state of consciousness, and this state of consciousness exists on these different planes of existence: physical, mental, and spiritual. So if we change the mental, we change the spiritual, and we change, which is the ability to manifest from source, from mind, into physical reality. Okay, so I actually have the Hawkins scale right here, and I sort of wanted to go over it just really quick. Because I really believe that this is what this is talking about. So let's use the example of abundance. If you feel shame, guilt, fear, that would, desire, anger, pride, those would be aspects where there would be very little inactivity, or there would be too much of a struggle. There would be hyperactivity, according to Dr. Hawkins. As the scale goes up, courage, neutrality, willingness, acceptance, then we become more productive. Then we begin to see manifestations of what we say that we want, because our consciousness itself is elevating. And as the mental changes, as the spiritual changes, the physical has to change, because these three are interconnected. These planes of existence are interconnected. And so as we develop a different state of consciousness regarding abundance, if we begin to be at peace with what we have, if we begin to pay our bills with love, which is one of the things I highly recommend doing when it comes to money. Do not pay a bill frustrated or angry. Wait until you're in a state of serenity. And if you have to cultivate that, if you have to have like a 20-minute meditation and prayer session before you pay every bill, I'd recommend it, because that is a reflection of our core beliefs about money. And if you're in a mental state that is in a lower vibration, then you're sort of locked into a physical condition that is, the equivalent of that vibration. And then, the spiritual vibrations that Dr. Hawkins talked about were things like love, joy, peace, and enlightenment. And those bring about, synchronicity and synchronistic outcomes. And that would be a total alignment with divine mind, or the superconscious is what a lot of people refer as that level of consciousness, and that would be spiritual. And we would be experiencing shifts in our physical experience based off of the spiritual principle. I know some of this stuff can be complicated, but just to summarize, all that this means is that the inner and the outer reflect each other, and the above and below reflect each other. That our mental conditioning can shift our physical reality, and our spiritual conditioning can shift our mental experience. That's why things like prayer and meditation can aid in our ability to manifest more of what we desire. So that's the second principle, the principle of correspondence, and we'll move on to the third. So the third principle is the principle of vibration. And a lot of us know this one because it's been talked about a lot. And we sort of touched on it on the last one when we were talking about the Hawkins scale. So the Hawkins scale is actually a vibrational scale. And I was talking to or talking about it regarding how it influences us with the, the previous law, as above, so below. Now, the law of vibration simply means that as we elevate our vibration, we attract experiences based off of that vibration. And in the Kybalion, it says, well, in vibration simply means, this is how the Kybalion describes it: nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. It's all that it means. And, again, we talk about this, if we've talked about the law of attraction, and the Kybalion says, he who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power, meaning that if we're able to shift our vibration, even if we shift it a little bit, if we're able to shift our vibration, we're able to shift our reality. We're able to attract different experiences into our life. And that doesn't necessarily mean we have to move from, deep despair to joy. That's pretty impossible. Sometimes we have to go gradually into different vibrations, but we have to work through them. We have to, recognize where we're at. And one of the recommendations with the Kybalion is actually to take a little bit of time and just feel the feelings that we're having, because it does equate vibration with emotion. And just, begin to really, say, okay, this is what I'm feeling. And instead of trying to immediately shift the feelings that we're having, really experience those feelings, because as we're able to experience them more authentically, it is easier for us to shift them. For example, if we move from despair to anger, to, as we move up on the scale, essentially, the more we're able to move up on the scale, the higher our vibration, the higher, or the better we'll be able to manifest based on our authentic and motivational desires. Not necessarily just the things that we want, but what is truly inside of us. We're all here for a reason. We all have a purpose that we came to this planet to serve. And it's not just to buy a new car every couple of years. I know that, a lot of people focus on just the physical, and that's fine. We do get the physical through things like the law of attraction, but I think that that's almost cheapening what is really going on when we talk about universal principles, whether it's Unity or Kybalion or Hermetic or whatever. I think the important thing to remember is that our main goal is to evolve our consciousness, and that our reality will certainly support that. In fact, our reality is always supporting it. That's what the law of vibration is all about. We're constantly attracting experiences based off of our thinking and feeling patterns. And so what the law of vibration in the Kybalion is talking about is being able to recognize where we're at. What are our thinking and feeling patterns? Do they reflect our present experiences? I think that's a big one as well to recognize. I know for me, I had a lot of fear issues when I was younger, and I had to really realize that, I had to put myself in the present moment and look around and just say to myself, I'm safe right now, like literally safe. There's nothing trying to get me. There's nothing, coming at me. I'm totally safe. And that really allowed me to be able to shift my thinking patterns, just recognizing what was real, what is real, because a lot of our thinking and feeling patterns are just habitual. They're just habits that we've developed over the years. We may have learned them from a parent, or we may have learned them from a teacher, or, our peers. And we just keep going with those patterns. We could have learned them from the news on television. There's a reason why the news is constantly advertising for antidepressants. That, some of the patterns coming through the news are not a good reflection of actual reality. I'm not saying that bad things don't happen. What I am saying is that it's not all of our reality. And we have a news stream that is almost, if we allow it to be, could take over our entire life. And it isn't a reflection of our present circumstance, our present, it's good to know what's going on, but it's, the news is not a reflection of our individual life experience and our personal universe that we're creating. And so shifting vibration is what the principle of vibration is all about in the Kybalion. And it's just about being able to elevate our moods, our, mindset, and so that we can attract, through the law of attraction, attract experiences that better reflect our deeper desires. The fourth principle is the principle of polarity, and it is actually one of my favorite principles. When I first read this book, it was the first time I even really thought about this in such a way, and it is my favorite because it has helped me resolve things like contradictions or paradoxes within my mind, which can, kind of make us crazy if we don't, resolve those things. And so I really appreciated this particular principle when I first encountered it. And so I'll read about the principle from the Kybalion. Everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has a pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet, all truths are but half-truths, all paradoxes may be reconciled. So what does that mean in a practical sense? Well, if you think about it, all that this is saying is that, we tend to think of the world in polarized viewpoints. We see hot and cold as different things, but the Kybalion would say, well, no, they're not different things. They are just representations of temperature. Love and hate, we tend to see those things as different things. The reality of it is that those are just representations of how much we care. And in fact, the people that, I have not experienced a lot of, I haven't hated a lot of people, so I don't really understand the concept that much, but I know people who do, particularly politically, because politics is very polarized. And hate is just investing our emotional energy. It's just investing our emotional energy into a lower frequency than love. That's all that it is, but it exists on the same pole. It's all about caring. How much do we care about a particular individual or about a particular, thing or, event or whatever we're investing our emotion into. They're on the same spectrum at different poles. Another one, since I did mention abundance previously, is poverty and abundance are both on the same pole as well. They're both associated with the vibration. And that's why when we're talking about abundance, the mindset, the feelings that we have associated with abundance, the mindset that we have is very important in our ability to shift it, because what we're doing is sort of think of it like on a scale. And if we're way down here, have a low vibration, which we could call poverty, if we're way down here, we have to shift to a different pole. And the reason why this can be so helpful is sometimes we see abundance as this thing that's unavailable, but it's not. We're just experiencing something on the same pole at a different frequency. And as we elevate just a little bit of it at a time, maybe, putting a little bit of money away every paycheck, or just, taking steps to save money, that sort of thing. And I'm talking about money, but this could be done in relationships. It could be, it could be done in the whole spectrum of our experience of reality is, the goal here would be to elevate our experience on the pole until we reach a point where we are at a state of serenity, at a state of peace. And, the truth is that it's not about gaining the other extreme. Think of hot and cold. I mean, you can be at either extreme and be very uncomfortable. You can be at either extreme and die. And the same is sort of true with everything else. Abundance, would not really be very effective if one person owned everything. And that's why, finding our place on these degrees and experiencing polarity and elevating our consciousness so that we can begin to trust more. Trust is really the catalyst to our ability to manifest anyway, because trust brings peace, and peace then is the vibration that we manifest through, as we talked about with the law of vibration. So yeah, so that is polarity, and it just simply means that everything exists on poles, and everything is essentially the same. And we can elevate our consciousness, we can elevate our experience, we can elevate the vibration to the level that makes the most sense. And this will resolve things like paradoxes or, all things are half-truths. None of us knows everything. This is just one representation of, of universal law. So that is polarity. So the fifth principle is the principle of rhythm. And this is actually, when I first read this, I actually had to read this a couple times because I really didn't quite grasp what the Kybalion was talking about. And even going through it again, even though I was just kind of perusing the book, and I still had to go over it more than one time because this one is a little bit harder to understand. But hopefully I can do it justice. So this is what the Kybalion says. Everything flows. Out and in, everything has tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. Now, so there are two laws under this particular principle, and there are laws under other principles, but I didn't quite go through those because it's such a short talk. But anyway, the two laws are important for this one. It's the law of compensation and the law of neutralization. Those two laws are sort of important for this discussion because it's really not easy to understand this one without them, especially since this almost sounds like polarity. The difference is this isn't about the vibration. So polarity is about the vibration, sort of like that scale that goes up and down. This is about the shift of vibration, and if there's a shift too quickly, we go back and forth. Think about politics and how the political pendulum keeps going back and forth because we are so polarized in terms of our political views. I mean, we literally only have two prominent parties in the United States. And so that pendulum keeps swinging back and forth and back and forth. Now, the good news is with that example is that there is the law of neutralization. This sort of reminds me of, if you've ever heard of the vortex, where we're constantly going back and forth, but we are evolving as well. And if you look at human history, we really have evolved. It's hard to see because we have so much polarization and because we have access to all of the information that is available, or a lot of the information that is available about what's going on in the world as a whole. It seems as though things are getting worse sometimes, but that's really not true. If you think about, if we lived 100 years ago, we would be completely unaware of many of the things that are going on. Now, there's benefits to knowing what's going on because we can make effective changes in our world that, racial justice, we can make changes for LGBTQI people. We have evolved. Even with this pendulum swinging, we have evolved. And that's really why a lot of people have difficulty with the Bible nowadays, is because people view it with a different consciousness. Consciousness has evolved, and that is because of this particular law, the law of rhythm, that there is a flow, a natural ebb and flow to life, but this ebb and flow leads us to greater and greater elevation of consciousness. So when we look at certain passages of the Bible, we see violence or something, it doesn't really make sense to our modern mind because our consciousness as a society has changed. Polarity can also be seen in a lot of the people. You may have heard a lot of people that win the lottery do not, after a few years, they lose all of their winnings. And this is because of this law of polarity. Our consciousness has to be able to hold an experience. So if somebody has a poverty consciousness and they don't shift the consciousness, but the amount of money that they have changes, the pendulum will swing back to that original state because the container to hold the experience wasn't there. That's the law of compensation. The law of neutralization is actually the ability to neutralize that. That's why we can elevate our consciousness and in turn elevate the experiences that we're having of life. For example, incrementally experiencing more and more abundance, more and more equality. I'm married. I couldn't get married 10 years ago. There are aspects of our world that are constantly shifting, and there is an elevating, emerging consciousness. And we're always sort of on an upward swing, even if the pendulum does go back and forth. So that is the law of rhythm. So the last one was a principle, not a law. I mean, I guess they're pretty much essentially the same thing. But anyway, principle number 6 is the principle of cause and effect. And so this is what the Kybalion says about cause and effect. Every cause has its effect, and every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. And so this simply means that everything that we experience, everything that happens in the universe happens as a result of a cause. And then we are essentially experiencing the effect of the cause. And, the first thing that comes to mind is, well, is there anything like free will? Well, let's go into the law a little bit. First of all, it says that everything, everything that is seemingly chance is just us not having enough information to predict the outcome. For example, if you roll a die or you flip a penny, if we were to understand fully, if we could perceive the cause of how a person moved their finger or where the dice, how they threw the dice, at what angle, we would be able to predict the effect. So some of the effects, seemingly chance are actually not. There's a cause for the reason why the dice rolled a certain way or the coin landed a certain way. So now, with free will, it sounds like we just don't have free will. And I would say that that is something that would exist on the polarity scale. Do we have free will or don't we have free will? And I would say both are probably true. The Kybalion certainly says both are true. So if we think about the initial cause, let's say the initial cause is God. We say God, the good, omnipotent. And if that's the initial cause, that means we all are headed toward greater and greater experiences of the good. Since that's the cause, the effect would be good. And so, so that is the initial cause. It means that we're all headed toward this same thing. Hopefully that makes sense. However, we also have our personal free will. It's an interactive type experience. And this would be, where it lands on the polarity. There are a lot of people that live their life, or that just, life tends to live them. They just live, in patterns, and they just keep repeating the same patterns over and over again. And, they're not really the cause. They're more of an effect. And then there are people who are, they are the cause for their life. They are proactive. They intentionally elevate their consciousness. That sort of thing allows a person to become the cause to the effect. And this is where, before I was talking about desire and how sometimes people desire, let's say, a big house, or they desire, lots of money. And I think one of the things that's really important is to really recognize what are our most authentic desires, because sometimes I believe that people don't even realize what their actual desires are. They're going after something, not realizing that's not what they want. And there are people that achieve what they think they want, and then they're not happy after they get it. And it's because at some point in time, it is very likely that someone with a more powerful will sort of influenced their desire, influenced their, they assume that this is their desire, but maybe their desire is just to feel more stable and secure in life. Maybe their desire is to help other people. Yet it's because they were influenced by something, they don't recognize their actual desire, so they're going after something that really won't bring any substantial fulfillment anyway. And so, and I mean, our parents bring about tremendous fears and limitations about life, or they can bring about joys and success in life as well. We certainly do tend to model, to some degree, our upbringing, our teachers. What does society say? Society has a very strong will over, out what we think we want. The media and commercials and all of that show us, hey, this is what it means to live a happy life. Well, is it what it means for me to live a happy life? Because it may not. And it might actually be the thing. Who knows? But getting in touch, centering ourselves using practices like mindfulness, meditation, those types of practices actually are actually the most effective tool in proactively engaging in this particular law of cause and effect. Okay, so we've reached number 7, which is the principle of gender, and I'll just go ahead and read what the Kybalion says about it. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine traits, but nothing escapes it. Now, this has nothing to do with gender expression. It doesn't have anything to do with sex or sexuality or anything like that. It's more about the principles, because it specifically says that gender is experienced on all planes. And gender is very similar to cause and effect. It's a little different A cause and effect is just a principle about, you know, recognizing where our desires at. Now, the principle of gender is about impregnating the subconscious mind to be able to manifest. So that would be the masculine principle, impregnation, and then the manifestation from the subconscious mind, the subconscious being the feminine, the mind being the masculine. The manifestation would then be the result of masculine and feminine energies combined to create a reality. So like another example would be, you know, the mind. This principle actually brings us back around to the first principle that everything is mental. The mind, or the all, impregnates nature, the natural realm, and the manifested universe is the result of that. And that's the principle of masculine and feminine. It's not really about gender or anything like that. So yeah, and it just indicates that we all have masculine and feminine within us. And it really is, for this particular principle, it really is about how we are impregnating our subconscious mind, because from our subconscious mind, all of our experiences are manifest or made manifest. And so this is more about the act of will and how we're participating in our ability to manifest our experiences. It's about the elevation of our vibration. And so let's use an example of an affirmation. Let's say we say an affirmation multiple times a day. But if we say it without any kind of feeling, we're not really having that energetic influence on it. We're not really utilizing that masculine principle and impregnating, again, the subconscious mind. And so with this principle, it would mean that we make sure that our emotions are lined up with it. It's about paying attention to, you know, if we say affirmations in the morning, well, what are we thinking the rest of the day? Because that's important. This is also about recognizing what we're allowing into our consciousness as well. You know, are we letting in certain kinds of music that aren't conducive to what we say we want in life? Are we allowing media or movies or television or books or whatever? You know, because all of those will end up being, you know, being an influence on our subconscious mind. And then we will manifest our experiences based on that. So that's the principle of gender. And so, and that's all of the Hermetic principles from the Kybalion. I hope you found this useful and helpful, and I will see you soon. Bye.